So I'm Joe Thomas. I work with the IDSA. I don't particularly look at food security, but I just wanted your views on the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act.
Sure.
And the fact that you sort of missed out covering that, because though it's just been a few years into that act, I believe that it's too early to sort of write off the benefits that an economy can see from such an act, because the Lewisian effect that it generates from the off-farm employment,
I take three and then,
I think that sort of a Lewisian effect India is yet to see. So I think due credit should be given to the government when you sort of criticize the Prime Minister. But I think, have you in any of your studies sort of measured the Lewisian effect it generates? One. And on the issue of urbanization, I'm completely on the same page as you that India is heading towards generation of these urban slums. But I was just wondering, where do we stand on the issue of the methodology that qualifies a particular set of people and a density to qualify as an urban space, because what qualifies for New Delhi doesn't really work for Copenhagen. So I just wanted your views. I'm on the same page largely on this, but I don't mean to the point.
I get your point. The very valid points. Second.
Thank you for a very stimulating talk. I'm Namrata Goswami. I work on internal security issues in the IDSA. Since I work on the Northeast and also have worked a bit on the Naxal conflict, I was very keen to hear from you. I would be very keen to hear from you critique on what is the problem with the state response to both these conflicts. Because these conflicts have continued for so many years and they're not going away. So it would be very enlightening. Thank you.
You know, despite all this tremendous, I'll call it critique, not criticism, of all that's happening in our country, we seem to be a happy lot, meaning either we're ignorant or, since I am a soldier, we couldn't get a bloody damn, and we are rolling around merrily. Now the government that you have criticized so much, it comprises guys like me and some big boys sitting in the rear, and we are reasonably intelligent guys. How come this doesn't affect us? Are we so blunted to the misery that we see every day? I mean, it's very good to criticize and all that. I'm glad you've done it. Tell me this psychological security that you talked about. Why can't we guys in the government think about all these poor people of our something, you know? Give me the root if you can.
I think it's an incredibly important program, and I think it is incredibly at this point hamstrung and limited. I actually say that it is heavily underfunded. Number one. Please, what is the, look at your corporate tax write-off is 4 times what you spent on NREGS last year. Number one. Number two, there are structural and design flaws in the NREGS. The most basic one is creating something which you claim is a, let me put it this way, the NREGS is a desperately necessary thing, not sufficient. It has to be part of a number of responses to your people's situation. It cannot be a one size fits all, one act does everything. It can't be, just as no one act can be. The NREGS, which I heavily participated in trying to influence the thinking in the 2004-5 period, as you probably know if you're reading the Hindu, for instance, poses itself as a demand-driven program. It is absolutely not a demand-driven program. It says 100 days per household. Your average poor household, agricultural laborers who need this work, your average poor household has 5, 6, maybe even 7 people. The kind of people who are willing to do that kind of work to earn 100 rupees or 120 rupees, the national average now 125 rupees. If you are a family of 6 or 7, 100 days per household is over in 17 days. What the heck are you supposed to do in the remaining 350, my friend? Lie down and die? You have said it's a demand-driven program, but the work is not when you demand it. Mr. Pawar is now pressing to make it even harder, saying during the agricultural season you should not do it. Yeah, sure.
If you increase it beyond 100 days of off-farm employment, wouldn't it be in a way more people away from agriculture, which would add to the problem?
I will show you. Firstly, I'm saying factually that is untrue in his home state of Maharashtra. Okay, let me give you this. Maharashtra is a state of 112 million people. Okay, Maharashtra, Amravati division is a region of 1.5 to 2 crore people, between 1.5 and 2 crore people. Please get on to the website of the government of Maharashtra and see how many people are in NREGS. NREGS is, Maharashtra is probably the worst performing state in the country on NREGS. Okay? The total number of workers in NREGS reported in Amravati is 8,000. The shortage of labor has nothing to do with NREGS. It has to do with all those laborers going off to urban periphery to find work in construction, headload, porting, transportation. 8,000 workers don't create a crisis in agricultural labor. The numbers are the government of India's and the government of Maharashtra's. What I'm trying to tell you is that there are far more highly paid forms of living where a guy goes to he goes off to Nagpur. He and his wife and his family will do 10 things, not one thing. Okay? And agricultural labor, my friend, is very hard. Please try doing it, and then you might find that we are not all rolling along so happily, sir. If you do agricultural labor and you have to break stone in 47 degrees heat. Why then is it important? Do you know who are the people who are reporting for NREGS? Have you seen them? Most of them are older people, desperate. People who have retired are coming back to work after 10 years. In my home state of Andhra Pradesh, I have recorded a town where more than 1/5 of the workers were above 65. Because your price rise has been, speaking of security, you've had the highest price rise in your history over a 6-year period, driving a 74-year-old fellow in Nalagonda to become a historic television figure in Andhra Pradesh because he comes back to break stone at 48 degrees Celsius in Nalgonda in Telangana. His name is Gadasu Ramulu. You can look him up. He's all over the net on ETV. I asked him, why are you here? You haven't worked for 10 years. He says, sir, my pension is 200 rupees a month. When tuvar dal is 100 rupees a kg, what the hell am I supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? Do you know one line of workers you will find at every site in Andhra Pradesh? Old widows. Because when there is a food crisis in an Indian household, the widows and the elderly get sidelined. They get pushed off. Like birds in a nest, when the mother bird is away, the birds push out the weakest bird. You know, survival of the fittest. Okay, so widows, for instance, can't get work in the the NREGS. For you to get work on the NREGS, you are much more likely to get work if you go in a group. That's how it's designed. A widow in her husband's village is a stranger to the village. She does not have a group. She goes alone, what in Andhra is called Gumpa. That widow does not have a Gumpa. She is a stranger in that village. She goes, she's standing alone, she's at the mercy of the site officer or the site assistant. You'll find a long line of poor women in their 60s standing there because they're not getting anything to eat at home and they're going for NREGS. These are the then we have measurement practices of work in NREGS. Okay. So now take Orissa. It's not just in NREGS, it's in education, it's in health. Today, for the last 8 years, the state of Orissa has not hired one full-time teacher. Do you know what is the payment of a teacher in Orissa today? Less than NREGS. Has it meant a huge diversion from NREGS to teaching? No, it hasn't. There is construction work, there is a construction boom in the country in certain urban. I'm coming to your next question. I'm trying to tell you that NREGS can actually, its interest can be reconciled with those of the farmers. It's not impossible. There are lots of farmers whom you don't hear who will argue this point that you can use the NREGS to create assets for the whole village. In which case, the farmer will be willing to bear the additional cost of labor if you were creating tanks, ponds, village ponds, a number of assets which will increase and double the productivity of that village farming. You can tie the NREGS to that, but we don't want to. What Mr. Pawar wants He wants the NREGS labor force to be handed over as a kind of bonded labor to the big farmers. That's what he is trying. Okay? There are other ways of doing it where you can. The other thing is, has NREGS raised the floor level of wages? Of course it has. And I'm bloody glad it has. For me, that's the biggest justification of the NREGS, that it has raised the floor price. I think it should raise it further. Okay, do you know something? Take Kerala for instance. NREGS is not taking any laborer away from work. Do you know who is working in Kerala? Guys are coming across from Tamil Nadu into Kerala trying to get onto the NREGS because 150. No self-respecting Mallu will work for 150 rupees. Will lift a finger for 150 rupees. The head load worker wants 250 rupees for the day's work. Today, 350, yeah. No, I'm saying the bottom line for you to lift a finger. Today, all Kerala's factories are manned by Bengalis and Odias. Go and look at the Thrissur side where I was 2 weeks ago. There's such a large Odia population. Okay, in the bars all the waiters are Odias. Now it's quite hilarious to watch the Mallu customer coming in and giving his order to a guy who doesn't know a word of the language. It creates incredible. Point is, NREGS didn't have a damn thing to do with it. Point is, in Mr. Pawar's home state, NREGS did not take away laborers. If it did, also by the way, I wouldn't regret it because I want people to pay higher wages. The farm labor must have higher wages. We are talking about the most malnourished community on earth. Farm laborers and agricultural laborers form the bulk of that population. They are the poorest people. Montague keeps telling everyone higher prices are better for farmers. You should know that 77% of Indian farmers are net purchasers of food grain. They buy food grain on the market. That price rise affects them very badly as well. You know, I find it appalling that we should be discussing, not you and I, but as a nation, this idea of food security and whether we should be feeding the hungry. Okay? Nowhere else is there such a debate. Okay? On migration and on the urban thing. Let me tell you how how a town is defined in India. There are two kinds of towns. The 2011 census is frightening and spectacular in one respect. Firstly, census and NSS do not capture migrations because they only look at long-range, long-term migrations. They do 6 months for NSS or place of birth in census. Neither of them captures what is the largest migrations in this country, footloose migration. Typically, a worker coming out of Orissa comes to Mumbai, works in Mumbai for 30 days on a building. Then the contract, that is over. The contractor shifts him to Thane, to Sangli. He is not anywhere for 6 months. He is not anywhere migrations that have been exploding, growing. They don't get counted as migrants. Again, in our home state of Andhra Pradesh, if you go to Telangana, there's a district called Mehboob Nagar. The government says 5 lakh migrations per year are normal. 5 lakh seasonal migrations. This year it's been around 12 lakh. Okay. It came down seriously in 2008 because of good NREGS. When the NREGS functioned, the migrations came down. When the NREGS again collapsed, migrations went up. You can count it in the number of buses going to Mumbai. Okay. So the children of these kind of migrants are your permanent underclass, permanent out of school, your permanent hardcore of illiterates. They will never go to school, and that's what you're reading in the government's data now on primary education. Those are your dropouts. They never go to school. Their parents are not going to be anywhere for 6 weeks, 6 months. How is a town defined in India? There are two kinds of towns. What we call statutory towns. A statutory town is your formal town with a municipal corporation, with its own fire brigade, with all its paraphernalia and appurtenances of civilized town functioning. Then there is a thing called census town. A census town is an arbitrary town where a village has collapsed, from 2-3 villages have collapsed into a shanty town. Like Patna rural becomes a town. Okay, how does that happen? The definition required for that, the definition for a village to be classified as a town has 3 requirements. Population density to cross 400 per square kilometer. 2, key element. male workforce in agriculture falls to less than 25%, which means agriculture has collapsed in that village. And 3, population of above 5,000. Okay? Population of above 5,000, the workforce in agriculture falls to less than 25%, and population density of above 400 per square kilometer or above. Now here's a very interesting thing. If you look at census 2011, statutory towns have declined. They have stagnated or declined. Which has exploded? Census towns have gone up by 3,000 odd. That means your arbitrary shanty town has exploded all over. It's in the evidence of your eyes every day. The shanty towns coming up where you go. Those sort of things have exploded. They are now formally little towns. What were periphery of urban areas, villages which have lost their agriculture, which have transformed into real estate or whatever they transform into, those have gone up. As a result, by the way, 2011 census, urban population bigger than the rural population. Meaning between two censuses. Let me give you an example. Urban population grew by urban population by 58 million. Rural population grew by 113 million. Okay? 2011 census, rural population grows by 90 million, urban population grows by 91 million. Do you know the last time that happened? 1921. 1921, the urban population grew faster than the rural. Why? Because, as anyone who has worn a uniform would remember the history, that was the period of the world wars and, more importantly, the influenza epidemic in which 16 million Indians died. So there's no comparison. We haven't had such a situation in 1990s or 2000. The influenza, by the way, many of the people who died in the influenza epidemic were Indian soldiers in France. Yeah, it broke out there. It broke out in the green fields of France, as it was called. The rural population of India in the 1921 shows a net decline of 3 million. Never, ever has that happened in your history. Thank God it's never happened again. But the 2011 census shows you that the urban population has added more people than the rural population, because it argues to me that there have been incredible migrations. There have been incredible migrations from the village to the closest urban periphery. Now your conventional demographers, like the ones sitting in the universities, they will dispute this like hell, because they think migration means Sainath leaves village, goes and settles in Mumbai. Because it's what they've done in their lives. They can't understand that there are multiple processes of migration, urban to urban, rural to rural, rural to urban. There is even urban to rural migration, very tiny, but it's there. Multiple processes of migration are on in your country. You've got a serious situation when that slum, when you move towards that particular thing. About Northeast, I'm really not very competent. See, for me, I would understand very simply, commonsensically. I'll talk to you more about the Nakshal thing than the Northeast. Commonsensically, if 7 states or 6 states of them are for 30 years under a state of suspended civil liberties, are under a state of virtual martial law, not having the rights of any other citizens of the rest of the country, or having a substantial number of them in suspension, I would expect them. Okay, now about the Nakshals, because we need the time on that. I work in Malkangiri. I've been working in Malkangiri from when the Maoists were not a force in early 90s, when it was still just a sanctuary for them from running away. By the way, at that time the Orissa government took the idea that it's not our problem. This is Andhra's problem. They're chasing them, and why do we, what's there in it for us? Different situation 10 years later. But look at what's happening. One, in a particular belt, the dispossession of people from natural resources is going to have an impact according to which is the strongest political force there. There are other places where similar battles are taking place, where there are no Maoists, no Nakshals, nobody. Let me put it this way. There are two basic errors that I think are being made in any analysis of this. One very basic error is the conflation of Adivasi with Maoist. Very, very big error. Please, this is a pretty ridiculous thing. Look, let me put it to you in a single, the ideological planks of these two different streams. Are there Adivasis with the Maoists? Of course there are. Of course there are. There are lots of Adivasis not with the Maoists also. However, here's my difference as a, in the thousands of Adivasis I know Adivasis who are Maoists. I have never known an Adivasi ideologically theorizing a war against the state. I have never known that. The Maoists have theorized a war on the state. The Adivasi is fighting to defend his resources. He is fighting to defend his or her forest. They're trying to defend their way of life. They have been fighting that way against different regimes for hundreds of years. They are fighting for their natural resources. That's a very different thing from waging war on the state. That's a very different level of theory. That's a very different level of theorizing. Conflating that. Now the Maoists, on the other hand, have complete clarity that they are fighting a war on the state. I'm saying conflating these two, you will make serious errors. Please don't make this error. I think someone who works on Maoist studies, I'm glad to see, seems to be nodding in agreement. Do you agree with me? Don't make that error. Now, but also the response to it is calculated to further generate the crisis, in my opinion. Last time I was in Malkangiri, I was stopped at 6 checkpoints. So 3 in Malkangiri town by armed men who are so frightened they don't identify themselves. They asked me to identify myself. So I say, okay, I'll identify myself. You tell me who you are. I knew they were CRPF. Okay, they would not. They said, no, we are asking you. Like, I asked you first, kind of. Further down is another checkpost. Sir, the Orissa police are so frightened, they wear plain clothes. They don't wear uniforms. Are you aware of this? They're hanging around at the police station and everybody keeps his checkpoint within 100 meters of the station. Nobody keeps a checkpoint far away from the home base. All their checkpoints are very closely aligned to the station because they're scared. Now, if I had a .303 and I had to take on someone with a AK-47, I'd be scared as hell. Now you have a situation of responding. What happens instead is that every truck driver, every car driver, everybody going down gets extremely harassed. Okay, so there is growing disenchantment in the everyday. Now, the Maoists, on the other hand, are not interfering with the everyday life of people there. There are some very opportunistic and dishonest things that come up, like the kidnapping of the collector. They put out great demands, BPL cards for all the people in the cut-off area. The moment they got their cadres released and the moment they got a few crores of rupees from the government, they dropped all the other demands and left. Okay. Today, that village I was in a few days ago in the village where the collector was kidnapped. Neither the Maoists nor the government has visited in the last 1 year. No government officer goes there. That village is in complete shambles. Okay. So, and it can only go against the state for such a situation to prevail. It can only go against that. So you are the response to that on the one hand.
You'll be running out of time and there are two more questions.
Yeah.
No, you end by this.
Yeah, but the point is this: it's that one, that conflation is a mistake. You have to have different strategies to deal with these different strands, and two, that the nature of the response, to my mind, is calculated to create greater troubles because it's abstracted from the whole politics of dispossession, from the whole politics of throwing people out of their resources, from the whole policy of impoverishing people. See, here's a very simple thing that all governments do in India. I was in POSCO 2 months ago. The first response to any displacement battle is to criminalize every protester. Kids in POSCO have attempted murder against them because they fought with the police at the barricade. Now, when you start on that, the only way to go is down. The same thing is happening in Jaipur. When the basic, it's not even an extreme response, it's the first response. It's not the last resort. The first response is to criminalize the protester. Okay. Now what about the security of that person who for God knows how many years will be appearing at either the police station or the courts or both? It is not designed to make that person deeply involved or enthusiastic about your national security. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 people, we're talking about millions in those dispositions. So think about it that way as well. Yeah. Oh yes. So yes, actually, historically, there is considerable evidence of the Indian elite's ability to disconnect itself from the misery of people. Now, you see, when Montek argues that 32 rupees is okay, there's nothing wrong with it, it's partly because he doesn't have to live on that. Yeah, he can roll along merrily. He's got his World Bank pension. He can roll along merrily. It's growing each time the rupee depreciates. His pension and Manmohan's pension grows with each fall in the rupee's value because they get dollar pensions. But let me talk to you about the Indian elite and disconnecting. Goes back in history, the proof of how easy it is for our elite. Now, look, let me give you an example. 1876, right here. Queen Victoria was tired of being a queen. She decided to call herself Empress. And the justification for that was that she had acquired a fairly large piece of real estate, which we today call India. So she became the Empress of India. You know the dinner party that they had here? It lasted a week. Have you read about it? The dinner party they had here had the costliest dinner party in history. Just as today, all through the suicides in Maharashtra and Punjab, the costliest weddings in the world are taking place in that area. In Vidarbha, the 2 costliest weddings in India have taken place. 1, the daughter of Mr. Praful Patel. 2, the son of Mr. Nitin Gadkari. Bipartisan. We're all in it together.
1 lakh.
No, Nitin Gadkari will get very angry with you if you told him it's 1 lakh.
That's what the paper said.
Because it's 2 lakh.
Oh,
He'd take offense. He'd take offense. Okay? And मैंने 2 लाख के लिए तैयार किया. So he's not going to object you saying 1 lakh, he's going to take offense. In 1876, the guest list of Victoria for her Empress coronation was 68,000 guests, almost all of whom were royalty from princely states. So they came with their entourage. They came with their horses, the guys who looked after the horses, the guys who cooked for the guys who looked after the horses. They all came this. So about 250,000 people were assembled here. 1876 general was the year of the famine in India. In Madras and Mysore, in those 7 days, 140,000 people died. Okay? Now if you read the newspapers of the period, you will find something very, very similar to the present, except that they were slightly better. They report the grand pomp, gaiety of the coronation. They also report the famine, but they make no connection. They were rolling along happily then. They didn't make that connection between they reported the famine. In fact, you'll find that the newspaper's Statesman reports the clubbing of peasants at the barricades set up by police to prevent hungry peasants from storming into the cities like Kolkata. They're clubbed at the barricades. The newspaper reports that, but it makes no connection between this misery and the party. Now, in the 90s, in the last 20 years, one of the fastest growing social phenomena in this country is your theme weddings. Now, if you're from Bengal, if you're from Kolkata, and you're into high culture, you create a replica Sistine Chapel for 12 crores if you want it to be exclusive. If you're willing to share it with another couple 12 hours after your wedding, price falls to 2 crores. Otherwise, it will be scrapped when you finish with it for 12 crores. And if you're from Delhi and patriotic, you know one of the most famous theme weddings in Delhi in 2002? Theme was Kargil, sir. So, 2 acres of land covered with billowing white canvases and dead plastic soldiers on the top, doubtless to impress on the young couple the seriousness of matrimony. Okay? So, it's obscene. Okay? They didn't give a damn about people dying. They didn't give a damn about those who died in Kargil. They didn't give a damn about their farmers dying back in their villages. That disconnection comes quite easily. All of us sitting in this room have been from that section of the class which has benefited greatly from the last 20 years. I have. I'm one of the biggest, when you say I'm criticizing Manmohan, let me say I'm one of the biggest beneficiaries of his reforms. I only object to it that it's a very narrow section of people who made the benefit. That's my criticism. And I believe that the nature of those policies cannot benefit the larger section. They are intended and directed. They believe in trickle-down economics. They believe in the creation and concentration of wealth, from which my understanding of trickle-down economics is very simple. All the lunch in this room has got to be on my table. You see, now it can't all be on my table. Something's going to fall off. The rest of you get to eat. That's trickle-down economics. Okay, so that's the kind of concentration. Yeah.
We'll take a last question.
Sainath, I'm a great admirer of yours. In one sense, I think you highlighted a lot of serious key issues which sometimes at policy making level, etc., they drop off the table or drop off the vision for a variety of reasons, vested interest, lobbying, and so on. But at least I sometimes feel, and I'm giving it from a partly insider's perspective, now outside, is that in some of the, I think you take such extreme positions on some issues that for many people who, when they are discussing your issue, they're able to say, oh, he said this, see, and here's the logical argument why it is not, therefore, since this is bad, everything else is bad. And let me give you a simple example. You said 9,000 crores is the customs duty exemption on gold, jewelry, etc.
49,000.
49,000. Now, basic principle is that all those customs duty exemption is because of a fundamental principle world over, that you